email came at 6:47 p.m. I expected audit prep, not a digital knife to the back. I've moved your inheritance to a safer account. Mine. My name is Nathan Caldwell. I'm 49 and I work as a procurement compliance officer at a university medical system in Atlanta. I built my career on finding discrepancies that others miss. The subject line read, "New Chapter." I set down my coffee and opened it. Elise's words filled the screen like a cold slap. "I'm starting over with someone who actually values me. I've moved your inheritance to a safer account. Mine." I read it twice. Didn't speak, didn't move. Just opened my financial app and scanned the trust accounts. Everything appeared untouched, every balance exactly where it should be. You know what struck me first? Not the betrayal, not even the money. It was the grammar. Elise never used semicolons. I typed back, "Appreciate the update." Then I opened a folder on my desktop. I'd labeled it, "In Case," 3 years ago after watching a colleague's messy divorce. Inside were copies of every important document we'd ever signed together. The irony wasn't lost on me. Earlier that afternoon, I'd been reviewing travel receipts for the audit. There it was, a flagged expense on our joint card. High Expense Spa in Sedona, Arizona. $4,200.00 for a week-long retreat. Elise had told me it was gifted, a thank you from one of her wellness clients. Guess that was technically true. I pulled up the transaction details. The dates didn't match her story. She'd been there 3 weeks, not one. My wife of 15 years, part-time yoga instructor turned wellness entrepreneur, had been planning this longer than I'd realized. But here's the thing about compliance work. You learn to spot patterns, inconsistencies, the space between what people say and what they actually do. I leaned back in my chair and looked around our mid-century house in Decatur. Everything exactly as we'd left it that morning. Her coffee cup still in the sink, the lavender candle she'd lit before heading to errands. How long had she been rehearsing this? I called the trust's lawyer, Lenore Whitaker, got her voicemail. "Lenore, it's Nathan Caldwell. I need to see you tomorrow morning, early. It's about the trust." Then I did something I hadn't done in months. I walked through every room of our house. Really looked at it. The yoga studio she'd set up in the sunroom, the expensive essential oil diffusers, the business laptop she'd bought last year, the one she claimed was for client consultations. Everything looked normal. Too normal. I sat back down at my desk and opened the trust documents. Irrevocable and individually held. My father's final gift, designed specifically to protect family assets from exactly this kind of situation. The old man had seen 3 divorces in his lifetime. He'd learned to plan ahead. Did Elise really think she could just move money that wasn't legally hers? Or was this about something else entirely? I closed the laptop and walked to the kitchen, made myself a sandwich. Ham and Swiss. Same as always. Outside, the October evening was cooling down. A neighbor was raking leaves. Normal Tuesday sounds. My phone buzzed again. A text this time. "I hope you understand this isn't about the money, it's about respect." I deleted it without responding. Respect, that was rich. The worst part? I wasn't even surprised. Somewhere deep down, I think I'd been expecting this call for months. Maybe that's why I'd kept that folder updated. Lenore Whitaker's office smelled like old money and firm decisions. I arrived at 8 a.m. sharp, before her assistant had flipped on the lights. She poured coffee from a silver thermos and motioned for me to sit. "Tell me what happened," she said. I handed her a printed copy of Elise's email. She read it twice like I had. Her eyebrows barely moved. "Moved your inheritance to her account. Interesting phrasing." I said nothing. 23 years working alongside attorneys taught me the value of silence. "Nathan," she said, setting the paper down, "the trust is irrevocable, individually held. Elise has no legal authority to access it." She pulled out the originals. My father's signature still looked fresh, ink pressed deep like he meant every word. Any attempt to touch those funds leaves footprints. Every knock at the digital door gets recorded. She opened her laptop. Give me a minute. While she typed, I glanced at the photos on her desk. Grandchildren in caps and gowns, a dog in a soccer jersey. Moments that felt honest. I wondered when Elise had planned this. Maybe during one of our own quiet Sundays? Here, Lenore said. There were multiple failed login attempts over the past few weeks. Most came from your home internet. I stared at the screen. Failed? 17. One got through. Read only. No funds moved, but everything was visible. She turned the laptop toward me. Timestamps, locations. A trail of quiet trespass. This isn't carelessness, she said. It's intent. I left her office and drove to campus. The cybersecurity team worked in a quiet sublevel most people didn't even know existed. Jordan Martinez had been my intern once. Sharp, intuitive. Now he ran the digital forensics desk like a conductor. Mr. Caldwell, he said when I walked in. Didn't expect you. I closed the door. I need a favor. Quietly. His face changed. He knew my serious voice. I explained the situation, the trust, the suspicious activity, the need for eyes on my cloud data. You want me to watch for intrusions? And record everything without raising alarms. Can you do that? He nodded slowly. I'll set a silent flag. If someone logs in, I'll know. What device, from where, how long they stay. I'll even record the screen. 3 nights later, he called. You need to come in. I drove back through quiet streets, the city lit like a circuit board. Jordan met me with 2 monitors glowing. She's not acting alone, he said. He pointed to an access record. This file was copied to a university-registered laptop. I leaned in. Belongs to Dr. Lane Dorsey. That name hit like a steel pipe. Head of Procurement Oversight, my boss, my Friday coffee partner. The man who toasted our 10th anniversary with a speech about loyalty and longevity. Are you certain? Jordan nodded. University inventory, registered to his office. I sat down hard. There's more, Jordan added. This wasn't a guessing game. Someone knew your account layout. They had inside knowledge. My hands tightened around the chair arms. Elise hadn't just betrayed me. She'd leveraged me, traded marriage for access. And Lane? He'd traded ethics for whatever she offered in return. Will the evidence hold up? Jordan brought up a screen. Every trace, every moment, it's airtight. I stared out the small office window. Campus was still. A few students walked between buildings. The rest of the world kept turning, oblivious. 15 years of marriage. 7 years of professional trust. All undone with a few keystrokes and shared secrets. But here's the thing about compliance. It's not just about catching mistakes. It's about designing systems that don't allow them to hide. I turned back to Jordan. Set a trap. He raised an eyebrow. Honeypot? A folder that looks valuable. Fill it with dummy data. I want to know the second they bite. Jordan grinned. I'm on it. The next morning, I called Lenore. My voice was calm, measured, the one I used in quarterly audit meetings. I want to file a fraud complaint, quietly. Also freeze all joint financial activity immediately. She paused. Once we start this, I know. Do it. She exhaled. I'll have the paperwork by afternoon. I hung up and glanced at my desk calendar. Friday coffee with Dr. Dorsey was circled in red. I drew a line through it. Then I opened a new folder on my desktop, labeled it Evidence. Some people react with emotion, others with precision. I've always preferred precision. I didn't confront anyone. That's not how compliance works. Instead, I began a silent audit, not of my own records, of Dr. Dorsey's. 7 years of access to procurement files gives you certain advantages. I knew which contracts raised eyebrows, which vendors had complained about bid irregularities. I started with the obvious ones. Dorsey's signature appeared on 3 disputed medical equipment contracts from the past 18 months. All above board on the surface, But the vendor selection process, that's where things got interesting. Mind Body Wellness Solutions had won a $340,000, 0 cents contract for employee stress management services. The proposal was professionally written, almost too professional for a startup. I cross-referenced the business registration, filed 8 months ago, principal address, a P.O. box in Decatur, the same zip code as my house. I pulled the original RFP documentation. 5 companies had submitted bids. Mind Body's proposal included detailed financial projections and market analysis. Guess who'd consulted on the vendor evaluation committee? Dr. Lane Dorsey himself. Dug deeper. Payment records showed funds flowing to Mind Body's business account in monthly installments, standard practice. But the banking information led to something that made my blood run cold. The business license listed Elise Margaret Caldwell as Chief Operations Officer. My wife hadn't just started a wellness business. She'd used university procurement processes to fund it, and Dorsey had signed off on every payment. I printed everything. Bank records, contract amendments, email chains discussing vendor suitability. 3 more contracts followed the same pattern. Different amounts, same process. Always with Dorsey's approval, always benefiting Elise's company. But here's what really caught my attention. On 4 separate occasions, Dorsey had used my name as internal sign-off for disputed contract reviews. My digital signature, my employee ID, my compliance clearance. I'd never seen these documents before in my life. That night, I compiled everything into a forensic-style report, 37 pages of evidence, cross-referenced, time-stamped, unshakable. The university's internal compliance auditor was Rebecca Torres. We'd worked together on vendor fraud cases before. I printed the report at home, dropped it in an unmarked envelope, no return address, left it on Rebecca's desk before 6 a.m. when the building was still empty. Jordan called me that afternoon. The honeypot worked. I met him in his office. 2 monitors showed screen captures from earlier that morning. She logged in at 9:23 a.m. Jordan said, stayed connected for 14 minutes. The footage was crystal clear. Elise's face, concentrated, scrolling through a folder labeled Legacy Planning. Inside were dummy spreadsheets I'd created, investment summaries, trust distributions, all completely fake, but realistic enough to make her think she'd found something valuable. Did she download anything? I asked. Everything. She copied the entire folder to an external drive. Jordan pulled up metadata. Device signatures match previous access attempts. And here's the interesting part. Another window opened. Network traces showing data transfers. After she finished with your files, she connected to a university VPN, accessed procurement databases for 47 minutes. They weren't just targeting my money. They were mining university contracts for additional opportunities. My phone rang 2 days later. Unknown number. Mr. Caldwell? This is Patricia Kim, representing Elise Caldwell. She'd like to discuss a financial separation arrangement for everyone's peace of mind. Her voice was professional, polite, like we were discussing a business merger. Send me the documentation, I said. Certainly. But perhaps we could expedite this process? Elise is concerned about potential complications. I stayed quiet. Let her fill the silence. She's prepared to be very reasonable about asset division, assuming we can resolve this quickly. Send the documentation, I repeated. After hanging up, I walked to my kitchen window. The neighbor was raking leaves again. Same routine as always. Some people panic when their plans fall apart. Others try to negotiate their way out. Elise was trying to negotiate. That evening, I discovered something that changed everything. While reviewing our joint credit report, something I'd started doing weekly since this began, I'd found a new account. A line of credit for $85,000. 0 cents. Opened 6 months ago, both our names on the application. I'd never signed anything. The account showed regular cash advances, always in round numbers, $5,000, 0 cents. $8,000, 0 cents. $12,000, 0 cents. The payment history told a story. Business expenses for mind-body wellness, travel reimbursements, conference fees, and hotel charges in cities where the medical system had vendor conferences, cities where Dr. Dorsey had traveled on university business. I cross-referenced his travel reports with the credit card charges. Perfect matches. Elise hadn't just stolen my identity for the trust access. She'd forged my signature on financial documents to fund their operation and their relationship. I called Lenore immediately. "I need to add identity theft to the fraud complaint," I said. "What did you find?" I read her the account details. The unauthorized signature. The systematic financial abuse. "Nathan," she said quietly, "this isn't just marital misconduct anymore. This is federal fraud." I looked at my reflection in the kitchen window. Same face, same house, same life from the outside. But everything had changed. Some people discover betrayal and fall apart. Others discover betrayal and get to work. I'd always been better at work. Rebecca Torres called me at 7:15 a.m. on a Thursday. Her voice was tight, professional. "Nathan, we need to talk. My office, now." The forensic report I'd left on her desk had done its job. When I arrived, she had 3 other people with her: legal counsel, internal audit director, someone from HR I didn't recognize. "Sit down," Rebecca said. "We verified your documentation, all of it." She spread copies of the contracts across the conference table. Elisa's business registration, payment records, digital signature logs. "Dr. Dorsey's been suspended pending investigation, effective immediately." The HR representative leaned forward. "We're also freezing all payments to Mind-Body Wellness Solutions. The business account has been flagged for fraud review." I kept my expression neutral. What happens next? "The university board is opening a formal investigation. Given the federal implications, we're coordinating with outside authorities." Legal counsel spoke up. "Your identity was used without authorization on multiple procurement documents. We're treating this as both employment fraud and criminal identity theft." That afternoon, Lenore called with an update. "I've served formal documentation to Elise and her attorney," she said. 3 charges: attempted trust fraud, marital financial misconduct, and unauthorized use of your digital identity and vendor fraud." How did they respond? They didn't. Patricia Kim said she needs to consult with additional counsel. Translation: they were scrambling. 2 days later, I was reviewing budget projections when my desk phone rang. University operator. "Mr. Caldwell, I have a Patricia Kim on the line. Says it's urgent regarding your wife." I took the call. "Mr. Caldwell," Patricia's voice was strained, "I need to inform you that the university has forwarded fraud claims to the state's Medical Fraud Task Force." I waited. She's very upset. She tried calling me from Arizona, but the connection was poor. I think she dropped her phone." "I see. She wants to know if there's still room for negotiation. Perhaps we could." "Send the documentation," I said, and hung up. Jordan found me in my office an hour later. "You need to see the news." He showed me his tablet. Local business journal. Small headline buried on page 3. "University Medical System suspends procurement official pending fraud investigation." Dr. Lane Dorsey's photo accompanied a brief statement about personnel matters under review. No mention of Elise, no mention of mind-body wellness, yet. That evening I received an envelope marked urgent legal notice. Inside was a cease and desist order served to Elise Margaret Caldwell. Formal language prohibiting any further attempts to access trust accounts, business systems, or university procurement databases. Her signature was required within 72 hours. The next morning brought an internal memo from the university president. "All vendor contracts bearing Nathan Caldwell's digital signature post-2021 are under review. Contract payments exceeding $50,000, 0 cents, Requires secondary authorization pending audit completion. I printed the memo and filed it in my evidence folder. By Friday, the dominoes were falling faster. Dr. Dorsey submitted his resignation letter. Personal reasons was the official explanation. The procurement audit confirmed signature falsification on 6 separate contracts totaling $890,000, 0 cents. Mind Body Wellness Solutions had its business license suspended by the state, but the final twist came from an unexpected source. Jordan appeared at my office door, holding a thick manila folder. "Remember that shared credit line you found?" he said. "The $85,000, 0 cents account? I did some digital forensics on the application documents. You're going to want to sit down for this." He opened the folder. Inside were copies of the credit application, signature cards, and supporting documentation. "Your signature was forged," Jordan said. "But here's the interesting part. The supporting documents used to verify your identity, bank statements, tax returns, employment verification." He spread them across my desk. "They came from your shared home folder. The same cloud storage Elise accessed from the spa. The same files she copied during our honeypot operation." I studied the documents. My personal information, my financial history, all of it harvested from our shared digital space over months of careful planning. "She didn't just try to steal your inheritance," Jordan continued. "She systematically documented your entire financial profile to enable identity theft." I leaned back in my chair. The scope of their operation was breathtaking. It wasn't impulsive betrayal. It was premeditated financial warfare, and they documented every step themselves. "The metadata shows these files were accessed and copied over a 6-month period," Jordan said. "Always from your home IP, always during hours when you were at work." While I'd been auditing vendor contracts and protecting university resources, Elise had been auditing me. That weekend, I received a final call from Patricia Kim. "Mr. Caldwell, my client is prepared to make full restitution. She wants to resolve this matter quietly." "Send the documentation," I said. "Sir, I don't think you understand the severity of—" I hung up. Some people think silence means weakness. In compliance work, silence means the documentation speaks for itself. And the documentation was screaming. 6 months later, I was drinking black coffee in a minimalist apartment in Midtown. Just enough light, just enough furniture. My calendar was clean. The Decatur house had sold in 3 weeks, mid-century modern, appeals to a specific buyer, and I'd priced it fairly. I kept what mattered, sold what didn't, donated the rest. The yoga studio equipment went to a community center. Someone would actually use it there. My new place had 2 rooms, a kitchen, and windows facing east. Morning light without complications. I'd taken early retirement from the university. 23 years of service qualified me for full benefits. The administration had been grateful for my discreet handling of sensitive matters. Rebecca Torres had personally walked my final paperwork through HR. That Tuesday morning, a manila envelope arrived with my mail. No return address, postmarked from Phoenix. Inside was a personal check for $85,000, 0 cents, made out to me, signed in Elise's careful handwriting. The memo line read, "Restitution." No note, no explanation, no apology. I held it up to the light. Bank of America. Routing numbers looked legitimate. It would probably clear. Instead, I walked to my desk and scanned it. High resolution. Saved it to a folder I'd labeled Closure. Then I tore up the original and threw it away. Some debts can't be paid with money. That afternoon, I drove to campus one last time. The October air felt familiar. Students walking between classes, faculty discussing research over coffee. Normal academic rhythms. I parked near the medical center and walked to the procurement building, the same route I'd taken for 7 years. Outside the main entrance was a donation box for student hardship funds. I'd walked past it hundreds of times without really seeing it. I reached into my wallet and pulled out my old staff badge. Nathan Caldwell, Procurement Compliance Officer. Photo from 2018, when I still believed in simple solutions. The badge slipped easily through the slot. No speech, no farewell, no dramatic gesture. Just a man who'd learned the system well enough to let it undo itself. I walked back to my car without looking at the building again. The drive home took 12 minutes. Traffic was light for a Tuesday. In my apartment, I made another cup of coffee and opened my laptop. My calendar was still clean, no meetings, no deadlines, no emergencies requiring immediate attention. For the first time in 23 years, my time was entirely my own. I closed the laptop and walked to the window. The afternoon sun was warm on my face. Somewhere in Arizona, Elise was probably starting her day. New name, new business, new problems to solve. Somewhere in Atlanta, Dr. Dorsey was probably updating his resume, explaining employment gaps to potential employers. And somewhere in the university's legal department, case files were being archived, evidence stored, justice documented in triplicate. The system had worked exactly as designed. I finished my coffee and rinsed the cup, set it in the dish drainer to dry. Outside, the city continued its normal rhythm: traffic, construction, people solving problems and creating new ones. I had no meetings tomorrow, no quarterly reports due, no compliance audits to coordinate. My phone was silent, my calendar was clean. For the first time in years, that felt exactly right.